Hey everyone, ready to dive into something truly ancient and awe-inspiring. Today we're exploring the world of Hinduism, going way beyond the typical intro stuff. You know, when you really think about it, it's kind of amazing that Hinduism has been around for, over 4,000 years, and it didn't even start with one single founder. That's got to be some kind of record.
It really is remarkable. Hinduism, or Sanatana Dharma, meaning the eternal order, grew organically over centuries. It's more like a tapestry, woven from diverse beliefs and practices rather than one single rigid doctrine.
So how do you even begin to unpack a history that massive? Our source material, Hinduism.pdf, points us towards the Indus Valley civilization as a good starting point. And it's interesting, so much of what we know from back then comes from archaeology, not written texts.
Exactly. Picture this. Archaeologists uncovering these crazy, sophisticated urban centers dating back to like 2500 BCE, cities with advanced drainage systems, impressive architecture, the whole shebang. And get this, amidst it all, they find these intriguing little figurines, symbols that suggest some early form of nature worship, maybe even deities connected to fertility, abundance, things like that.
Wow, so people were already tapping into the divine through nature long before organized religion as we know it came about.
Seems like it. And that deep respect for nature, that's a core element of Hinduism even today, speaks to a worldview that sees the sacred woven into everything around us.
Makes you wonder what those ancient civilizations made of things like floods or storms, right? Those powerful forces of nature. But moving on, our source material takes us next to the Vedic period. That's where we see the Vedas emerge, these foundational texts in Hindu tradition.
Right. It composed around 1500 BCE, the Vedas offer a glimpse into the beliefs and practices of the early Indo-Aryan people. They are collections of hymns, prayers, rituals, revealing a complex relationship with the divine, one that was heavily intertwined with ceremonies and offerings.
So at that point, it sounds like connecting with the divine was something that required specialized knowledge, the authority of priests.
Yeah, you could say that. The Vedic period was all about those ritualistic practices, with priests acting as guides, leading people towards the divine.
It's just fascinating how, even within a single tradition, the approach to spirituality can change so drastically over time, which leads us to the Upanishadic era, which sounds like a pretty significant turning point for Hinduism, wouldn't you say?
Around 800 BCE, things started to shift. There was a move away from that outward focus on rituals and sacrifices. Instead, people began turning inward, exploring the self and the universe in a more introspective way. This era gave rise to the Upanishads, philosophical texts wrestling with some seriously profound questions. We're talking about the nature of reality, consciousness, ultimate truth, the whole 9 yards.
So it became less about appeasing the gods and more about understanding the very essence of existence itself.
Exactly. And that's where we first encounter two concepts that are still absolutely central to Hinduism today: Brahman and Atman.
Okay, now those are two terms I'm definitely going to need some help unpacking. What exactly do they represent, and how did they come about back in the Upanishadic era?
Right. Imagine, if you will, the entirety of existence, everything that is, was, and ever will be. That, my friend, is Brahman. The ultimate reality, the cosmic principle, the very ground of being. It's said to be beyond human comprehension, something you can't fully grasp with your mind alone. It's more about intuition, transcending those limitations of the intellect.
So less about defining it, more about experiencing it, acknowledging that something far greater than our human understanding exists.
Exactly. And within this vastness of Brahman resides Atman, your true self, not the body, not the mind, but that unchanging eternal spark of consciousness within each of us.
So while Brahman is the infinite, Atman is our own personal connection to that infinite. It's that idea that we're not separate from the divine, but rather a part of it. Powerful stuff to emerge from such an early period.
Absolutely. And the amazing thing is, those concepts first explored thousands of years ago during the Upanishadic era still shape Hindu thought and practice even now. That just shows the enduring power and relevance of these ancient insights.
It's incredible how those ideas have resonated across millennia, shaping a tradition that's still so alive today. But let's unpack some of those core beliefs that come from this understanding of Brahman and Atman. Most of us have heard about karma and reincarnation, but I have a feeling there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. These aren't just mystical ideas floating around in isolation. They're deeply intertwined with this understanding of Brahman and Atman. I mean, if we accept that our true self, our Atman, is this eternal, unchanging reality, then it makes sense that our journey wouldn't be limited to just one lifetime.
So that's where reincarnation comes in, or samsara, as it's known in Hinduism. It's not simply about being reborn, but about the continual evolution of our Atman throughout multiple lifetimes, right?
Exactly. Samsara, this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, is seen as a natural part of existence, a way for us to learn, grow, and ultimately realize our true nature as Atman.
And within this cycle of samsara, karma plays a pretty crucial role, doesn't it? Although I'll admit I always thought of karma as kind of this cosmic scoreboard, good deeds equal rewards, bad deeds equal punishment, that sort of thing.
That's a common misconception, actually. Karma isn't about judgment or punishment. It's more about cause and effect playing out across lifetimes. Think of it like the law of gravity. It just is. Every action, thought, intention, they all create a ripple effect, influencing our future experiences, not only in this life, but in lives to come.
Okay, so less about a cosmic judge-keeping score and more about understanding that our actions have consequences in the grand scheme of our soul's journey.
Precisely. And when you think about it, this concept of karma can be pretty empowering. It reminds us that we're not just victims of fate. We have an active role in shaping our own destiny across lifetimes.
Which kind of begs the question, if we're all on this continuous journey through samsara, what's the ultimate goal? What are we ultimately working towards?
That's where moksha comes in, often translated as liberation. But it's important to remember that moksha isn't just about going to some heavenly realm after death. It's something much more profound. It's about breaking free from the entire cycle of samsara itself, from this endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
So no more coming back. That does sound pretty liberating, I have to admit. But how do you even begin to achieve that? It seems almost unfathomable.
It's not so much about striving for something external. It's about realizing your true nature as Atman, recognizing that inherent connection to Brahman that we talked about earlier. It's a process of self-discovery, gradually peeling away those layers of ego and attachment that keep us bound to this cycle of suffering.
Makes sense. If suffering comes from a sense of separation, then realizing our unity with the divine would be the ultimate liberation. Our source material also mentioned dharma. I'll be honest, I always took that to simply mean duty, but I get the feeling it's a bit more nuanced than that in Hinduism.
You're definitely onto something. While duty is a common simplification, dharma is a far richer, more dynamic concept. Think of it as your unique path in life, your purpose, the actions and choices that align with your true nature. And just as you evolve over lifetimes, so does your dharma. It's not static, it unfolds, responding to your ever-changing circumstances and understanding.
So it's less about blindly following a set of rules and more about this continuous process of self-discovery, of understanding what feels right, what feels true at any given moment on your journey.
Absolutely. It's about looking inward, reflecting on your values, your strengths, aspirations, but it also means paying attention to the world around you, recognizing how your actions impact others, how they contribute to the greater good.
It's just amazing how all these concepts, Brahman, Atman, karma, reincarnation, moksha, dharma, how they all weave together. They create this intricate tapestry of understanding about reality, the purpose of life, the journey of the soul. It's more than just believing in something. It's a lived experience that unfolds over lifetimes. It's amazing to think about, how all these different concepts weave together like that. But we can't talk about Hinduism without addressing, the deities, right? This is where I think a lot of people, myself included, can get a little, lost.
It's understandable. Hinduism is often seen as this polytheistic tradition with what seems like an endless number of gods and goddesses. But just like everything else we've talked about, it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Right, our source material touched on that. It's not just about worshiping a bunch of separate gods. It's about understanding them in relation to Brahman, that ultimate reality we were discussing earlier.
Exactly. Imagine if Brahman is this vast, boundless ocean of existence, right? The deities are like the waves on the surface. They're distinct, each with their own unique qualities, stories, but they all ultimately arise from that same source.
Okay, yeah, that's a really helpful analogy. So it's about recognizing the divine in all its different forms, right? Understanding that something so vast, so all-encompassing, can't be contained in just one single concept.
Exactly. It's about expanding how we see the divine, not limiting it.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'm guessing there are some deities that are, maybe more well-known than others, ones that even those of us with, let's say, a beginner's understanding of Hinduism might recognize.
Definitely. Let's touch on a few of the most prominent ones. We can start with Brahma, often depicted with 4 heads, representing each of the 4 Vedas. He's generally seen as the creator deity, the cosmic force behind the universe coming into being.
And then there's Vishnu, the preserver, right? He's a pretty popular one. I seem to remember all sorts of stories about his different incarnations.
You're right. Vishnu is deeply revered. He's often shown holding these specific symbols: a conch shell, a discus, a lotus flower, and a mace. Each one represents a different facet of his power as the preserver of cosmic order, the one who keeps everything in balance. And you're spot on about those incarnations, or avatars as they're known in Hinduism. Vishnu is believed to take on different forms, like Rama and Krishna, whenever the world needs help, whenever evil threatens to take over.
So kind of like a cosmic superhero stepping in to set things right.
In a way, yeah. Each avatar has their own epic story, their own lesson to teach, but they all embody Vishnu's role as protector and sustainer of the universe.
What about Shiva then? He's often portrayed as the destroyer, which, I'll be honest, always seemed a little, intense to me.
I get that. But it's important to remember that in Hinduism, destruction isn't necessarily a bad thing. Shiva represents the cosmic force of transformation. It's about the necessary dissolution of the old to make way for the new. Think of it like the cycle of seasons, Autumn's decay makes way for the rebirth of spring.
So it's less about annihilation and more about the cyclical nature of existence, the idea that endings are also beginnings.
Exactly. Shiva embodies that constant dance between creation and destruction, the ebb and flow of the universe's energy.
That puts things in a whole new perspective. Now, our source material also mentions Shakti, who, if I'm remembering right, represents the divine feminine.
That's right. Shakti is a powerful force. She embodies the feminine energy that animates the universe. She's worshipped in many forms, each with its own attributes and mythology, but they all point to that crucial role of the feminine in creation and existence itself.
Wow, it's amazing how much depth, how much symbolism is packed into each deity. But it's not all about the deities themselves, right? There are actual practices, rituals, scriptures that shape how Hinduism is lived day to day.
Absolutely. Hinduism is a living tradition, full of rituals, festivals, spiritual practices. And at the heart of it all are the Hindu scriptures, this vast, ancient body of texts that offers guidance, wisdom, inspiration. We talked about the Vedas earlier, those divinely revealed texts considered the most authoritative. But there are also what's called the Smriti texts, things like the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, and the Mahabharata. These offer interpretations, stories, ethical guidelines.
Wow, so much to explore. And it's not all ancient history either, is it? These ancient principles have influenced social movements, even modern practices like yoga and meditation, right?
Exactly. Think about Mahatma Gandhi and his philosophy of nonviolent resistance rooted in the Hindu principle of ahimsa. Or look at how popular yoga and meditation have become worldwide, both stemming from those ancient Hindu traditions. These practices, these philosophies, they aren't bound to just one culture or time period. They have this timeless wisdom that resonates with people from all walks of life.
It's been such a fascinating journey, exploring the history, the core beliefs, the idea of deities as aspects of Brahman. It's a lot to process. But as we wrap up our deep dive into Hinduism, what would you say is the most important takeaway? What do you hope listeners will remember from all of this?
Hinduism, at its core, is about recognizing that divine spark within ourselves and within all beings. It's a call to live authentically, in harmony with our true nature, to seek that unity with the ultimate reality, and to contribute to the well-being of everything around us.
Beautifully put. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, don't stop here. Pick up those ancient scriptures, try out yoga or meditation, or just sit with these profound concepts we've been discussing. This is really just the beginning of a lifelong journey of discovery. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Hinduism. Until next time, everyone.